Chapter 352. It's incredible, Senpai. Fufu only appeared in front of the two of us. Matthew smiled. Maybe it's a coincidence. Godatsi shrugged her shoulders. He didn't think about foes matter anymore, and Godatsi told him the purpose of his visit. By the way, Matthew, what are you worried about? Godatsi's words made Matthew fall into silence. Actually, Senpai, I can't release my noble phantasm, and I don't know the real name of the servant that I possess. Matthew said softly. Is it important that you can't release your noble phantasm, and don't know the real name? Matthew is Matthew and that won't change. Godatsi instantly held Matthew's hand. Godatsi, who followed Wu Ming, Olga, Marie and the others, already knew the importance of noble phantasm. However, Godatsi didn't think that Matthew was embarrassed because he couldn't release his noble phantasm. However, Matthew still looked very uncomfortable. I know, with Assassin Senpai, your safety won't be threatened. Matthew said little by little. That's not it. Godatsi instantly interrupted. Matthew looked at Godatsi with a stunned expression on his face. Assassin is very strong and reliable, but Assassin is the leader's servant, and the only servant that can protect me is you, Matthew Gillett. Godatsi grabbed Matthew's shoulders with both hands, and looked straight into Matthew's clear eyes. Fufu, who was originally on Matthew's shoulder, had already jumped away. Senpai. Matthew looked at Godatsi with a somewhat helpless expression, and then he was touched. Since we can't release the relic, we'll ask for Assassin's help when he comes back. I'm sure Assassin will have a solution, Godatsi encouraged Matthew. But the servant's real name? Why don't we ask Assassin later? Maybe he will know. Ahaha. Godatsi laughed awkwardly. Really, you need someone else to confirm your servant's true name. Suddenly, Olga Marie's voice sounded. Godatsi and Matthew turned around and saw Olga Marie at the kitchen door. Really, it's not easy to find a kitchen. Olga Marie complained casually. After all, our house was considered a small villa, and the structure was quite unique. Matthew and Godatsi were lucky to be able to find them so easily. Sigh. Director, why are you here? Godatsi's expression changed from embarrassment to confusion. Of course, I don't trust you to buy two. After all, there are only two of you in Chaldea. Olga Marie said impatiently. That doesn't Assassin count? Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a student. After all, Assassin is a servant with a special identity. Not to mention that he can't follow me back to Chaldea. With Assassin's identity, I don't think the small Chaldea can tolerate him. First, he could summon by himself, and now he could change his class. No matter how you think about it, Wu Ming was a guy with a super mysterious identity. How could Chaldea tolerate such a hero with a special mission? Moreover, the master can see the attribute value of his servant. In short, because you are too weak, you can't see Matthew's real name. Olga Marie said as she stretched out her hand to Godatsi and pulled Godatsi's cheek. It hurts. It hurts. Director, please be gentle. Godatsi complained incoherently. Humph. In short, as long as you become stronger, you can see Matthew's ability value and his real name. Work hard. Olga Marie snorted and loosened her hand that pulled Godatsi's cheek. Yes, I know. Godatsi's eyes were filled with tears as he rubbed his cheeks. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Then Godatsi seemed to remember something, so she asked Olga Marie. By the way, Director, do you know Assassin's real name? Godatsi asked curiously. I'm also very curious about Assassin's real name. Mashu also looked at Olga Marie with a curious look. You two are so annoying. Hurry up and cook for me. Then, with Olga Marie's yelling, Matthew and Godatsi began to busy themselves in the kitchen. How can I see something like a real name? I don't have master qualifications. If he didn't have such a cheating method, I wouldn't be his master. Olga Marie said lightly while looking at Matthew and Godatsi busy in the kitchen. And I'm also a fake master. After Matthew and Godatsi made some simple dishes, Wu Ming came back. However, Wu Ming returned with a rather disheveled big blue dog. A big blue dog? Godatsi said doubtfully. That's a servant, can't you see it? Olga Marie refuted Godatsi's words. Really, a servant in front of you can't even detect it, and it's not even an assassin. Olga Marie couldn't help but think. Yo ladies, the big blue dog greeted Gadazi and others frivolously. Bang! Wu Ming gave him an elbow hit in an instant. A dash. Hey, I'm injured. Listening to his complaints, Wu Ming glanced at him with disgust. You almost left, so behave yourself, Cuculin. That's right, the big blue dog was Cuculin who caught Fergus's noble phantasm neon sword. After Wu Ming finished, he threw Cuculin on the sofa. Ha ha ha, but I have to say hello when I see the ladies. Cuculin was a little hurt, but he still looked frivolous. Cuculin? Is that the hero of the Long March of the Bulls? Sure enough, he looks like a playboy. Olga Marie looked at Cuculin's frivolous appearance and said awkwardly, he's the caster I said would help us, but now it seems that this guy can't even protect himself. Wu Ming spread out his hands. What happened? Gadazi asked. This guy caught Fergus' noble phantasm. I didn't expect him to survive. Wu Ming held back his laughter and explained to everyone. Fergus? He's Cuculin's adoptive father and friend. Olga Marie was relieved. The neon sword you mentioned, is it the magic sword that can cut off 3 mountains? Yes, that's the sword. The identity of the red saber has been confirmed. It's that old rogue. Wu Ming said with a slightly angry expression. It seems that Assassin and Fergus must have experienced something. Gadazi and others thought so. Ha ha ha, it's just that Fergus flirted with Maeve. You still hold a grudge. Cuculin suddenly laughed. Chapter 353. Because Wu Ming used to work for Maeve, he was on the side of Connaught. After the war with Ulster, he ran over and said that he wanted to work for Maeve. Because of Fergus' frivolous words, Wu Ming threw him out. Of course, the process took a lot of effort. After all, Maeve was someone that Wu Ming recognized as his sister. Even if Maeve wanted to fall in love and get married, Wu Ming would never allow an old rogue like Fergus to come. Not to mention that Maeve did not have such thoughts. Maeve, who was obsessed with Wu Ming, did not get married until she died. Instead, she played with men and let them die one by one under her pomegranate skirt. Moreover, they died before they could take advantage of her. Of course, Wu Ming also contributed to this. As a warrior who protected his sister's chastity, Wu Ming naturally shot those who wanted to use force. You said that you didn't want to marry Maeve, and you didn't let her find another man. You even made our 2 countries go to war. I really don't know what you were thinking. Cuculin complained about Wu Ming helplessly. She was already throwing herself at you. Why didn't you want her? It's fine if you don't want her. Don't get in the way of others. Don't get us involved. Back then, for some reasons, Wu Ming had been protecting Maeve. But after all, Wu Ming was a traveler and had no plans to stay in any place. Then, in order to prevent Wu Ming from leaving, Maeve started the war between Connaught and Ulster. I don't have a choice either. Wu Ming rubbed his forehead. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this. It's all in the past anyway. Cuculin, who hated Maeve, began to change the topic. With the identity of an enemy established, they have an advantage in launching a general attack on us, Wu Ming said. How did you escape? Wu Ming asked Cuculin. Cuculin was not the kind of guy who would throw his life away even if he knew that he could not win. Come to think of it, it seemed to be true. Cough cough. Speaking of which, Fergus wouldn't say I'm going to use my noble phantasm. And so on to let Cuculin escape. Fergus must have judged that Cuculin could not escape, so he released his noble phantasm. Logically speaking, Cuculin should have left. However, Cuculin, who was covered in wounds, smiled. Don't underestimate the Lune Rune, brother. Cuculin smiled. Even so, Cuculin was seriously injured. As the prototype of the holy sword, the demon sword, I was careless. Wu Ming smiled. The Lune Rune was something that the Norse main god, Odin, had sacrificed an eye in exchange for. How could it be weak? Wu Ming had never used the Lune Rune in battle, so he had neglected the power of the Lune Rune. You are the first disciple of the master. If the master knew, you would be finished. Cuculin laughed at Wu Ming. You'd better behave yourself. Who knows when you'll disappear, Wu Ming said. He disappeared in an instant and appeared in front of Cuculin. Once again, he gave Cuculin an elbow strike. Pfft! I said I was injured. Cuculin rubbed his wound again and complained loudly. So, do you need to make a contract with this master? Wuming said, pointing to Gadazi. After Cuculin's explanation, his master disappeared in an instant, leaving nothing behind. Wuming guessed that the other black followers were the same. Although the black followers in Winterwood City had lost their master, because of the mutation of the Holy Grail, the black followers without a master could still ensure that they would not be sent back to the Hall of Valhalla through the connection of the Holy Grail. But Fergus's magic sword was not so easy to block, and Cuculin barely survived by relying on the power of the Lune Rune. Hey! Gadazi saw Wuming pointing at her, and she was a little overwhelmed. That, if Mr. Cuculin is willing. Gadazi said shyly. Oh, it's a young master. Of course I am willing. Cuculin was instantly excited when he saw that his master was a young girl. Boom. It was the sound of a huge object falling to the ground. Mr. Cuculin, please respect yourself. Matthew stood beside Gadazi, slammed his huge shield to the ground, and then looked at Cuculin seriously. Fortunately, Matthew did not use too much strength, or the floor would have to be changed again. Wuming thought. Yes, I am very honest, Cuculin said. Wait a minute. Olga Marie walked in front of Wuming and Cuculin. What's the matter with you two? Olga Marie roared. Olga Marie's understanding of Cuculin had been refreshing since he came in. After all, the conversation between Cuculin and Wuming was very clear. Your real identity is a warrior of Connaught, the silver dragon Sira, who is as famous as Cuculin. Olga Marie looked at Wuming's eyes. Sira? Gadazi looked at Matthew in confusion. That senior, it's like this. Matthew took Gadazi's hand, quietly went to the side, and told Gadazi about Sira and history. Oh, senior brother, you haven't told them your real name yet. Cuculin, who was sitting on the side, said gloatingly. After all, I'm not Sira now, just a man-killer fiend. Wuming helplessly spread out his hands. Assassin. Jack, is your real name Jack the Ripper? After hearing Wuming's words, Olga Marie guessed Wuming's real name. Fog, London, black clothes and hat. Being able to call himself Jack, a pair of female noble phantoms, Olga Marie judged our real name from all this information. Man-killer fiend? Are you kidding me? How could you be a man-killer fiend? Cuculin frowned and asked in confusion. Wuming's senior brother, a great hero, turned into a man-killer fiend, which really damaged his image. Well, this is for the vengeful spirits of those children. I replaced them and became Jack the Ripper. Wuming smiled indifferently. Replaced the vengeful spirits, became Jack the Ripper. Olga Marie carefully thought about Wuming's words, savoring the meaning. However, Cuculin didn't understand at once. So that's how it is, as expected of you. It seems that you have experienced a lot in the future. Through Wuming's words, Cuculin immediately guessed why his senior brother became Assassin Jack the Ripper. It was nothing more than absorbing Jack the Ripper's spiritual base, freeing the vengeful spirits that were originally trapped, and becoming Jack the Ripper himself. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then Wuming looked at Olga Marie. Sorry, master. At first I wanted to hide my real name, but later I realized that you might not like this identity, so I always wanted to hide it. What an idiot. Olga Marie said softly. Olga Marie raised her head and looked into Wuming's eyes. You listen to me. You are my follower. No matter what, I won't mind. Looking at Olga Marie's determined eyes, Wuming smiled. What a frank Olga is not bad. Chapter 354. Then Wuming was scolded by the arrogant Olga Marie again. Wuming didn't care, after all he was arrogant. Later, Cuculin and Gadazi concluded a servant contract. Originally, Cuculin wanted to conclude a temporary servant contract, but because it was not conducive to physical recovery, Wuming forcibly changed Cuculin's mind and concluded a formal contract with Gadazi. My body has gradually begun to recover. I didn't expect the little girl to have such excellent qualifications as a master. Cuculin felt his physical condition and couldn't help but look at Gadazi. Of course, this was not a flirtatious look, but a surprise at Gadazi's potential as a master. Don't underestimate Tachika, she has excellent master qualifications. Patting Cuculin on the shoulder, Wu Ming smiled. Olga Marie was a little jealous at this time. After all, her master contract with Wu Ming was a half-finished product that Wu Ming cheated. However, I still want to be my master. Wu Ming, who noticed Olga Marie's expression, continued. This made Olga Marie blush again, and Olga Marie glared at Wu Ming angrily. However, Olga Marie looked very much like an angry kitten. The food is getting cold. Let's eat first. In order to avoid embarrassment, Matthew took the lead in changing the topic. Gudatsi and Matthew had already finished cooking and brought the food to the table. Now they could enjoy it directly. Suddenly, Gudatsi let out a loud cry. By the way, Mr. Assassin, there is one more thing I have to trouble you with. Although Cuculin's previous recklessness made everyone know Wu Ming's other identity, the Connaught Silver Dragon Wu Ming still asked everyone to call him Assassin or Jack. After all, he now came with this identity. Is there anything else to Chica? Wu Ming asked gently, which made Gudatsi blush. After all, Wu Ming was really handsome in a black leather jacket and a black top hat. Can you tell Matthew's real name? Or her noble phantasm's real name is fine. Gudatsi knew that her request was a bit difficult, but she still put her hands together and begged Wu Ming. To Chica, didn't I say, as long as you become stronger? What? Noble phantasm is an instinct. Olga Marie was about to say something, but Cuculin instantly interrupted her. Marie suppressed her anger. She looked at Cuculin's eyes, and didn't say anything. Instinct? Mashu pondered over Cuculin's words. Ah yes, it's instinct. Cuculin spread out his hands. Servant and noble phantasm. These two exist together, and are not separated from each other. If you haven't been able to release your noble phantasm, it's probably because your instinct hasn't been activated. With that, Cuculin looked at Gudatsi, revealing a dangerous look, and at the same time, emitting a murderous aura. Gudatsi was a little puzzled, but Matthew and Olga Marie instantly understood what Cuculin meant. Mashu quickly raised her shield and stood in front of Gudatsi, while Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a scrutinizing look. Chica is now your master. Don't think about doing anything dangerous. After all, even if Cuculin was someone Wu Ming knew, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't do something to hurt them. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, so it was normal for her to have such thoughts. Okay, Cuculin, don't tease them anymore, Wu Ming said. Well, I'm just livening up the atmosphere. Cuculin smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the murderous aura. Then, I'll leave the noble phantasm and the real name to you. I'm going to rest, brother. After saying goodbye to Wu Ming, Cuculin's spiritual form disappeared. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly at Cuculin's character. Don't mind him, he's just like that, Wu Ming said to Gudatsi and the others. Immediately, Matthew also put down his shield and retreated to Gudatsi's side. So, can you let Matthew use his noble phantasm? Olga Marie asked, sitting on the sofa with her arms crossed in front of her chest and her legs crossed. Let's not talk about this in a hurry. Let me ask you, Matthew. Did the servant who lent you his power tell you his real name? Wu Ming looked at Matthew. No. Matthew was stunned, then shook his head. Really? What was the servant who gave you power thinking? He didn't even tell you his real name and noble phantasm. It's really a headache. Olga Marie covered her head. Generally speaking, a servant's noble phantasm was related to their own life experience. Matthew didn't know the real name of the noble phantasm, so it was normal that he didn't know what the servant was. Wu Ming smiled, then Wu Ming continued to ask. So when you saw Berserker Lancelot, did you have any reaction? Although Matthew didn't understand Wu Ming's intention, he still thought about it. When I saw him, I didn't feel anything, but when I knew he was Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake, I was a little angry. Matthew, why are you angry? Gudatsi was a little puzzled. I don't know. Wu Ming shook his head. So, you mean that the heroic spirit who gave Matthew power has a special relationship with Lancelot? Olga Marie was a first-class magician, and she immediately guessed Wu Ming's intention. That's right. Wu Ming nodded. The reason why he asked Matthew this question was because Wu Ming knew the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power from the beginning. The most noble of the Knights of the Round Table, the Knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, the Knight of the Holy Grail. That was the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power. For a long time, Matthew had addressed Wu Ming and Gudatzi as seniors, but he didn't use the term senior to address others. He addressed Gudatzi as a senior because the two of them formed a bond in Chaldea, and others addressed Wu Ming as senior by Matthew, meaning that Wu Ming was senior Wu Ming. But in fact, Galahad was the only one who addressed Wu Ming as senior back in Camelot. Because Lancelot admired Wu Ming the most, he told his son Galahad to be particularly polite to Wu Ming, but Wu Ming didn't like the word lord, so Galahad addressed Wu Ming as senior. Although that was one of the reasons, Wu Ming recognized that the power Matthew used was Galahad's because of the shield. The shield was basically the same as the shield that Artoria held during the Round Table Conference, but the details and size were different. Even Bedivere couldn't bear the burden of the Round Table, only Galahad could. The purest and noblest knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, only he could bear the burden of the Round Table. The servant who gave you the power to survive from the brink of death, and gave you the power to protect Tachika is named Galahad. Chapter 355. Galahad. Matthew put one hand on his chest and whispered the name softly. Thank you, Assassin Senpai. Matthew bowed to Wu Ming happily to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Matthew. Even without me, you would have known Galahad's real name sooner or later. Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. Then Wu Ming gave Matthew a doji. And don't be happy too early. Although I know Galahad's real name, I don't know the real name of his noble phantasm. Why? Gudatzi was puzzled. After all, noble phantasms are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Although there are many physical weapons and noble phantasms, most of them are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Wu Ming looked at Gudatzi and explained to her. For example, the noble phantasms of Cuchulain, Fergus, and the others were with them when they were alive. Generally speaking, this kind of noble phantasm was the name of the weapon itself, so knowing the name of the weapon would mean knowing the real name of the noble phantasm. However, there were many noble phantasms that had never been seen before in history. The most classic example was the treasured artifact that betrayed the witch Demetrius, Rule Breaker Talisman, Rule Breaker. It was the embodiment of the traitor witch's life, just like her entire life. The Rule Breaker Talisman was also full of betrayal. Although the noble phantasm itself was not as powerful as the knife, it had the ability to nullify all magic. It could completely nullify contracts based on magic, or life forms born with magic. Needless to say, this kind of noble phantasm was much more powerful than the Gay Balg, which was a weapon with a physical body. Galahad's noble phantasm appeared after becoming a heroic spirit, so I don't know. Wu Ming finished his explanation. Aren't you special? How can you not see through the noble phantasm of a servant? Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming with some dissatisfaction. Then I'm really sorry. I don't know about this kind of relic that only exists after it has been upgraded. Wu Ming shrugged indifferently. That's a pity. Gudatzi said regretfully. It's okay, senpai. At least I already know that the servant who gave me power, and my benefactor is Galahad. Matthew comforted Gudatzi with a smile on his face. Well, you're right. I've already completed half of it. When I become stronger in the future, I'll be able to find out about Galahad's noble phantasm. Gudatzi said excitedly. At this moment, Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming. You can't get Matthew to use the relic? Wu Ming smiled at Olga Marie's question. I didn't say that I couldn't let Matthew use the relic. I just didn't know the real name of the relic. But how can you use the relic without knowing its real name? Gudatzi was completely confused. She tilted her head and looked at Wu Ming with Matthew. Olga Marie, on the other hand, was frowning. Even she couldn't figure out how to use the relic without knowing its real name. Looking at the puzzled crowd, Wu Ming began to explain about the relic. After the death of various characters according to their life experience, they were upgraded and also obtained a trump card called the relic. The relic is the trump card of every hero. And to release this trump card, you need to call out the real name of the relic. This is indeed the case. Wu Ming finished, sat on the sofa and poured himself a cup of tea. Speaking of which, Gilgamesh's tea was not ordinary. It had been so long, but the tea was still warm. Go on. Olga Marie said impatiently. Okay, don't worry. Wu Ming took a sip and put the teacup down. The so-called name of the relic is actually just a form. Cuculin also said that the relic is an instinct. Is there a limit to your instinct? If that's the case, it's not an instinct. Wu Ming spread out his hands. Now, for Matthew, what he lacks is not only the real name of the relic, but also the recognition of the relic. Only then can he unleash the power of this table shield. Wu Ming almost said the table, but fortunately he changed his words in time. What did you say in the end? Gudatsi seemed to have heard something different, but she didn't hear it clearly. Ahem. Don't worry about the details. At present, we need to give Matthew's shield a real name. This time it will be easier to release it when needed. Wu Ming quickly changed the topic. Then, how about Assassin give Matthew a real name for the relic? Gudatsi suggested. This shouldn't be done by me, but by you guys from Chaldea. Wu Ming said, looking at Gudatsi, Matthew and Olga Marie. Is it up to us? Gudatsi thought, but she didn't have a clue. Naming something, Gudatsi inexplicably felt that the world was full of malice. Then, when Mashu releases her noble phantasm, how about shouting Lord Chaldea's? Olga Marie suddenly said from the side. Lord Calds. Matthew carefully thought about the real name of the relic. Well, thank you, Director. Matthew sincerely looked at Olga Marie and thanked her. Olga Marie looked at Matthew's sincere smile, and was a little stunned. No. It's nothing. Then, Olga Marie said softly. Without a doubt, Olga Marie was proud again. Great. Matthew. Then you can release the relic. Gudatsi hugged Matthew and said happily. But don't be happy too early. At this moment, Wu Ming retorted. After all, if you can't be recognized by the relic and release the relic, then the so-called Lord Chaldea's is a joke. Wu Ming looked at Matthew and Gudatsi seriously. Assassin is right. If Matthew can't release the relic, then the real name I gave you will be wasted. You have to work hard. Olga Marie encouraged. Yes, I will work hard. Matthew nodded excitedly. You too, Tachika Fujimaro. As a master, your self-awareness is really bad. I will train you later. Olga Marie said to Gudatsi sternly. It can't be. Gudatsi's face was filled with worry. For this girl who was just an ordinary person not long ago, special training was like running a few kilometers in military training. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and eat. After eating we will train. Olga Marie pinched Gudatsi's cheek and urged. Senior, you have to work hard. Matthew cheered her on. Yes. Gudatsi said helplessly. Wu Ming looked at Matthew's figure, and couldn't help but think of the pure young man Galahad. Maybe, you didn't tell her your real name to train her. But with me here, your idea may not work. Galahad, well, I will help you train her. Wu Ming looked out of the window. Although the sky was dark, the future was full of hope. Chapter 356. After dinner, Gudatsi was dragged by Olga Marie for special training. It was called special training, but in fact, it was Olga Marie telling Gudatsi about magicians, servants and masters. After all, even if Gudatsi stepped into the world of magicians, she was still a girl. Becoming a master meant that he might die, and Olga Marie's task was to make Gudatsi recognize all of this. She didn't want him to disappoint Mashu and be a qualified master. While Olga Marie was doing special training for Gudatsi, Wu Ming was also doing special training for Matthew. In the yard, Wu Ming and Matthew were fighting against each other. Mashu put her shield on the side of her body and was ready to fight. Wu Ming, on the other hand, wielded a silver-white longsword. That's right, it was the meteor silver. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's assassin class wouldn't have weapons of other classes, but Wu Ming cheated by bringing his noble phantoms, Dragonist, with him. Although this class couldn't release the meteor silver, it could still be used for hand-to-hand combat. As a shielder, you must have a defense that can resist all attacks. That shield is already very strong, so you have to start with the person holding it, Wu Ming said carefully. Matthew listened carefully to Wu Ming's words, nodding his little head from time to time. Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Wu Ming held the meteor silver and put it in front of him and said, Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Are you ready, Matthew? Wu Ming said sternly to Matthew. Yes. Senpai, I am ready. After saying that, Mashu placed her shield in front of her and looked at Wu Ming from the corner of her eyes. Let's go. After that, Wu Ming rushed toward Matthew. Clank. The holy sword and the holy shield collided, making a very harsh sound. Matthew blocked the attack and made a muffled sound. You can't do it, Matthew. You have to know that my strength is only C-class. You have to adapt to this impact, or your master will die. Wu Ming criticized Matthew. Yes, senpai. Matthew responded loudly. Again. After that, Wu Ming hit Matthew's shield again. Clank, clank, clank. Silent continued to attack Mashu's shield, and there was a burst of harsh sound. Matthew struggled to support himself and took Wu Ming's blow after blow, making muffled sounds again and again. Matthew's legs couldn't stop shaking, and his hands couldn't stop shaking, but Matthew didn't let the shield leave his hands. Drops of sweat slid down Matthew's cheeks and fell to the ground, but Matthew was still holding on. Wu Ming looked at Matthew with relief. Gudatsi was really lucky to have such a follower in Junior. Gradually, Wu Ming's sword swung faster and faster. Matthew, who could still rest between swings, gradually had no chance to catch his breath. Clank, 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 clank. Gradually, the meteor silver in Wu Ming's hand turned into a silver-white sword light and bombarded Matthew's shield. If one looked closely, they would find that each sword light was enchanted with magic. This was an alternative version of magic discharge. Although Wu Ming didn't have this skill, because of Wu Ming's EX-level infinite magic, Wu Ming could extract the magic from his body and enchant it on the meteor silver. This was another advantage of Wu Ming. Because Wu Ming was not dead and had a powerful identity, Wu Ming had the memory of his class. For example, Cuculin as a caster should only have knowledge about the Lune Rune and not the spear art. However, his spear art was engraved in his bones, so even as a caster, Cuculin could still fight a few rounds with Wu Ming. Moreover, for example, Stheno and U'Reilly, the two of them didn't have corresponding classes at all. Because of the performance of their class, the two of them were given the ability of that class. For example, Wu Ming was now an assassin, so Jack the Ripper couldn't use magic. Therefore, Wu Ming couldn't use the magic in his mind. He could only inject magic into the runestone to detonate it. Similarly, Wu Ming couldn't use the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm, because Jack the Ripper didn't have any records of using the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm. This was also the disadvantage of being a servant. It would fix the development direction of a certain class. Once a servant was summoned in a certain class, the most convenient weapon to use would be the weapon of that class. For example, if U'Reilly was an archer, she would have an extra bow in her hand and would have knowledge about bows and arrows. At this moment, Matthew was enduring the high-density slashes that were infused with magic. However, although Matthew looked like he couldn't hold on any longer, Matthew was still able to hold on. Matthew, Gudatsi, who had arrived at some point, looked at Matthew, who was struggling and couldn't bear to look at him. She then turned her head away. Don't turn your head away. Olga Marie stood beside Gudatsi and stared at Wu Ming and Matthew in the courtyard. She said to Gudatsi, "Did you forget what I told you? Watch them carefully." After Olga Marie finished speaking, Gudatsi seemed to have made up her mind. She clenched her fist and looked at Matthew, who was struggling to hold on. Wu Ming, of course, noticed Gudatsi and Olga Marie's arrival. Therefore, Wu Ming gave Matthew another dose of medicine. "What's wrong, Matthew? Can't you do it? Your master is watching you." Hearing Wu Ming's words, Matthew turned his head and looked to the side. Sure enough, Gudatsi was looking at Matthew intently. Matthew read something from Gudatsi's eyes. "Hold on, Matthew. I believe in you." Matthew read the sincere encouragement in Gudatsi's eyes. "If I were an enemy, then I would completely defeat you and kill your master." This sentence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Matthew's eyes suddenly shrank, as if he thought of the scene that Wu Ming said. He was defeated, and Gadazi was cruelly killed. No. Senior. Ah. In an instant, Matthew roared. The magic all over his body condensed on the shield. Matthew shook the shield violently, and a white light began to appear. A strong white wall gradually emerged. Lord Chaldeas. Chapter 357. With the release of the noble phantasm, the chalk wall appeared in front of Matthew. Bang! Wuming attacked the chalk wall, but he was bounced back. The meteor silver was inserted into the ground, and Wuming stepped on the ground to maintain his balance. The meteor silver and Wuming's legs were pushed back by the huge force, leaving 3 deep marks on the ground. I see, is this Galahad's noble phantasm? No, it should be Matthew's noble phantasm, the pure land of Chaldea in your heart. Wuming pulled out the meteor silver, and looked at the chalk wall that was as pure as Matthew's heart. Then Wuming put away the meteor silver. Well done, Matthew. Wuming gestured to Matthew and gave him a thumbs up. That's great. Matthew looked at Wuming's thumbs and said weakly. Matthew looked at Matthew's thumbs up. Then Mashu looked at Gadazi, who was running toward her, and her vision turned black, and she fainted. Wuming instantly appeared behind Matthew and hugged the unconscious Matthew. Gadazi ran over and looked at Matthew worriedly. You did well, Matthew. I'm proud of you. Gadazi held the unconscious Matthew's hand and said with a smile. Really, your training is too cruel. Olga Marie walked to Wuming and looked at the unconscious Matthew and complained to Wuming. But Matthew persevered and released the noble phantasm, didn't he? Wuming looked at Matthew with relief. At least her efforts were not in vain. And now there's a strong enemy. Matthew has to do this if he wants to grow up quickly. Then Wuming took out a runestone from his black ripples. The Lune rune on it represented healing. Placing it on Matthew, Wuming injected magic into the runestone. The runestone broke, and the pure green energy turned into light spots and merged into Matthew's body. Visible to the naked eye, Matthew's body disappeared, and even his cheeks had a trace of peace, as if he had a good dream. Athena told me that warriors can only grow in battle, but Matthew is a defensive type, so I used this method to train him. Athena? Are you hiding something from us? Olga Marie crossed her arms and stared at Wuming suspiciously. Silence was in Ireland, and would not have anything to do with Greece. Therefore Olga Marie looked at Wuming suspiciously. Ahem. I'll send Matthew back to his room first. Tachika, please take care of Matthew. Wuming quickly changed the topic, and then carried Matthew in his arms. As for the shield, it was naturally carried by its master. Oh, okay. Gadazi nodded and picked up the shield. Why is it so heavy? I thought it was light. Gadazi's face was red as she carried the shield. Usually, Matthew could carry it easily, but she didn't expect the shield to be so heavy. Matthew is a servant. Even if he is a sub-servant, he is still a servant. Of course, his strength is higher than yours. Come on, Tachika, this is also part of training. Wuming looked at Gadazi with a smile, and then left first. Wait a minute. Gadazi carried the shield, struggled to follow Wuming, and left. Really, both of them are so troublesome. Olga Marie rubbed her forehead. How many things is he hiding from me? Then, Olga Marie began to think about Wuming's secrets. Exploring a man's secrets is the first step for a woman to fall. Suddenly, Cuchulain materialized. None of your business. Olga Marie proudly stared at Cuchulain. Although Cuchulain was rejected, he didn't get angry or retreat. Then Cuchulain moved forward and stared at Olga Marie as if he saw something interesting. The talent of a magician is first class, but he doesn't have the talent to become a master. That's interesting. It's none of your business. Olga Marie angrily pushed away Olga Marie, who was staring at her. Cuchulain, who was pushed away, didn't get angry. He smiled casually, and then began to talk about Wuming. By the way, my brother is really resourceful. He can even make a contract with someone who doesn't have the talent to become a master. Cuchulain waved his hand and said casually. That. At this time, Olga Marie suddenly opened her mouth. Huh. Cuchulain looked at Olga Marie in confusion. Are you close to assassin? Olga Marie asked with a slightly red face. It was a little embarrassing for a proud person to put down her attitude and ask someone else. Cuculin's eyes lit up. He had already guessed Olga Marie's thoughts. Not very close. After all, the first time we met was on the battlefield. But I heard a lot about my brother from my master. We also talk about him in our free time. After all, we are not mortal enemies. We fight all the time. If Wu Ming heard this, he would have hammered Cuculin's head. If Cuculin hadn't been serious, Wu Ming wouldn't have fought him to the death. Did you think that the spear of impaling death was so easy to receive? Besides, isn't there a saying that the one who knows you best is often your opponent? So I know my brother quite well. Cuculin looked at Olga Marie and grinned. What? Do you want to know my brother's privacy? Cuculin teased Olga Marie. Olga Marie's face turned red when she heard Cuculin's teasing. Ahem. After all, he is my follower. It is necessary for me to know my follower's story, isn't it? Olga Marie coughed and replied righteously. Isn't there a record in human history? In fact, the stories of our heroes are basically similar to what is recorded. Cuculin waved his hand. Instantly, Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a "you're dead" look. First of all, I only know my brother's story in Ireland. Cuculin raised his hands in surrender. That's fine. Let's get started. Olga Marie thought for a moment. It was better than nothing, so she nodded. Then Olga Marie came to the steps and sat down, waiting for Cuculin's story. Then, Cuculin looked in the direction of Wu Ming. After confirming that there was no Wu Ming around, he began to tell the story. His story is basically similar to what you know, but I have to tell you about him and Maeve. As if he thought of something, Cuculin smiled gloatingly. In the beginning, my brother was a traveler. However, he said that he was traveling around, but in fact he just couldn't find his way. Cuculin laughed. You mean he has no sense of direction? Olga Marie also wanted to laugh. Ah yes, but he was a greenhorn. Now he shouldn't have a sense of direction. Cuculin smiled and shook his head. After that, the first place he went was Connaught, and because he accidentally saved a damsel in distress, he was entangled by Maeve. Chapter 358. In the end, Maeve's father intervened in the battle, and my brother took the opportunity to leave. After that, I never saw him again. Cuculin, who had been leaning against the wall for a long time, stopped. The story was over. Maeve really didn't get married for assassin? Olga Marie found it hard to imagine that Maeve, who was called a slut, would keep her virginity for a man. Yes, after all, Maeve was captured by Wu Ming as soon as she left home. Therefore, although Maeve seemed to be dissolute in the days after that, as far as I know, she has been keeping her chastity. Cuculin looked helpless. But even if senior brother were to follow Maeve, the war would still happen. There's no difference, Cuculin said in an open-minded tone. After all, Maeve was called a person with a bad character by my master. Cuculin waved his hand. Olga Marie, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look on her face as she held her chin with one hand. So that's how it is. Anyway, don't get too involved with my senior. At this time, Cuculin's tone began to become serious. The iron rule of servants is that they can't interfere too much in this era. If the girl's heart is locked onto the servant, it won't be good for either of them. Cuculin was saying that they shouldn't rely on Wu Ming too much. Once the Holy Grail War is over, Wu Ming will leave here, and whether he can be summoned again is still a question. If it's just a one-sided love, it's okay, but if both of them have a deep sense of dependence on each other, it's really bad for both of them. It's like a common love between a god and a mortal, and in the end, it won't end well. Because not to mention the lifespan of the two, they're not on the same level. I'll think about it. After a moment of silence, Olga Marie answered. What a wonderful story just now. Suddenly, Wu Ming's ghostly voice came from behind Cuculin. Cuculin let out a strange cry and quickly distanced himself from us. However, a hand pulled Cuculin's collar. Yo senior, what a coincidence. Cuculin pretended to be fine. I didn't expect you to be able to tell stories. No wonder you're a caster, Cuculin. Wu Ming smiled and looked at Cuculin. It's okay. Cuculin smiled awkwardly. After all, no matter what, he was still talking about her behind her back, so it was a little awkward. Pay attention to the situation around you. Don't let the enemy servants take advantage of you. Wuming let go of Kukulin after saying that. Understood. Kukulin waved his hand at us, and his spirit form disappeared. After Kukulin disappeared, Wuming looked at Olga Marie. At that moment Olga Marie had turned away, blushing. Didn't Kukulin say that it's not good to know too much about a man? Wuming didn't get angry, but said in a calm tone, "What can I do? You're always so mysterious. It's right for me to want to know more about you." Olga Marie replied, not to be outdone, but her voice was a little weak. Olga Marie still didn't turn around, but from the way Olga Marie's ears turned red, her face must be as red as a monkey's but at that moment. However, the fate that we have formed together will not be broken. Wuming said inexplicably. Olga Marie looked at Wuming in confusion. Wuming smiled and continued. My mission is to save this world, and your mission is to solve this singularity, isn't it? Since our goals are the same, then we are companions. Companions will definitely be able to understand each other in the future, so there's no need to rush. Companions? Olga Marie carefully thought about Wuming's words. But you will leave after this, won't you? How can we understand each other then? Olga Marie looked at Wuming. Yes, it wasn't that Wuming didn't have a chance, it was that Olga Marie didn't have a chance. Olga Marie's words reminded Wuming of the fact that Olga Marie herself was a ghost. As if he had decided on something, Wuming walked behind Olga Marie, turned his back, and sat down next to Olga Marie. Ah! Olga Marie felt the warmth on Wuming's back and screamed. What do you care? Wuming smiled without turning his head. Oh no, I was just startled, said Olga Marie indifferently. Wuming shook his head helplessly. The once reliable director was now like a little girl. In that case, let's get to know each other first, my master. Wuming suggested in a light tone. Olga Marie was silent. Wuming didn't say anything either, just quietly waiting for Olga Marie to speak. You know, because of my identity, I've never had any friends since I was a child, and my only teacher died in an accident. Olga Marie spoke. Although it's not a good time to complain, we still think that Olga Marie didn't have any friends because she was arrogant. After that, I threw everything I had into magic. Fortunately, my talent was there, and I became a first-class magician, and the next head of the Animus family. Olga Marie leaned on Wuming's back and continued. 3 years ago, my father, one of the 12 monarchs of the clock tower, the monarch of the astrology department, died. Olga Marie was a little sad. I became the new monarch of the astrology department, and then, in order to inherit my father's will, I became the new director of Chaldea. But you know, the world of magicians is cruel. Olga Marie's eyes were a little dim. The other magician families began to target me, the young monarch, and the people in the family began to gradually disapprove of me. And in Chaldea, I was very busy because of all kinds of things. Olga Marie painfully held her head. Her body was a little stiff. Then I met Leviticus at this point. Wuming could feel that Olga Marie's stiff body relaxed. Whether it was the family's disdain, the other family's suppression, or the various troubles in Chaldea, as long as Lev was there, he could help me solve them. Olga Marie thought of the dead Lev, and felt a little sad. When I knew Lev was dead, I felt like the whole world was collapsing. Saying this, Wuming felt Olga Marie's abnormality. Her body and heart were constantly shaking, like the straw on a camel's back. But you are still the director of Chaldea, the monarch of the astrology department, Olga Marie Asmerit Animus. Chapter 359. You are one of the 12 sovereigns, the director of Chaldea. Although Lev is no longer here, you still have Tachika and Matthew, and they all care about you. Although Roman seems to be quite frivolous, I believe that he is still reliable. Wuming said without looking back. Perhaps this was the so-called true love is revealed in adversity. Now there were less than 20 people left in Chaldea. These people could continue to operate Chaldea and support Gadatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's singularity exploration, not only because of their good character, strong will, but also because they cared about the 3 people. If they choose to give up when most of Chaldea's facilities are damaged and almost all the staff members are dead, then can you still solve the singularity smoothly? Wu Ming proposed. Let's not talk about other things first. Take the space travel technology, the collar transfer, for example. Without the help of Roman and the others, you can't return to Chaldea. Olga Marie was a little confused. She had never thought about these problems. Roman and the others' backup support, in Olga Marie's view, was reasonable. She didn't consider whether the remaining 20 people in Chaldea would go on strike. They care about you and believe that you will be able to solve this singularity. How about you? How should you shoulder the responsibility of a director? Do you have hope in your heart, or do you have despair in your heart? Wu Ming's series of questions made Olga Marie a little sluggish, and she couldn't respond for a while. Besides, don't you still have me? I am your servant. Don't forget that I am a cheating servant, so what's wrong with finding a cheating master? Wu Ming said frivolously. So it's just Leviticus. You still have all of us. If we all disappear, I can understand that you're devastated. But if you're devastated because of Lev's disappearance, then you're really sorry for all of us who care about you. Listening to Wu Ming's words and feeling the warmth of Wu Ming's back, Olga Marie calmed down. At this moment, Olga Marie seemed to be out of the shadow caused by Lev's death. That's right, I'm really embarrassed like this. Olga Marie smiled. And it was a smile without the slightest arrogance. That's why it's better to be frank like this. Wu Ming suddenly turned his head and looked at Olga Marie's smiling face and said. Seeing that Wu Ming was going to tease her again, Olga Marie was angry again. You. How dare you say Lev, you're a mere servant. Now, Olga and Marie were no longer in a state of confusion over Rafe's affairs. Mama, don't pay attention to the details. Wu Ming smiled and stood up. Since there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to find Gilgamesh. After all, she's not a good child who would go home on her own. Wu Ming said as he prepared to leave. Wait a minute. I have already told you about me, what about you? Olga Marie seriously stared at Wu Ming, as if to say don't even think about running away. What do you mean by telling you about yourself? In the end, I'm the one who comforted you, you arrogant master. Wu Ming teased Olga Marie, making Olga Marie furious again. Assassin, anyway, we still have a long way to go. I'll leave it to you to slowly discover my things. That's it, see you later. Wu Ming smiled at Olga Marie. After saying that, Wu Ming's spirit body disappeared. Still have a long way to go. That's right. Olga Marie smiled and happily returned to the house. However, she didn't know that she was already dead. However, Wu Ming won't let this fact come true. The cheating servant has already thought of a way to let her cheating master live. The next morning, everyone in the villa was basically in a state of deep sleep. Even several servants were resting, maintaining their spirit bodies. Ha! Cuculin yawned, which was the product of boredom. Really? Why do I have to keep watch at night? I've already set up the alarm. The servants also need to rest. Cuculin protested. Because Cuculin spoke nonsense to Olga Marie, Wu Ming specially punished Cuculin to keep watch at night in a state of non-spirit body. However, Cuculin completely protested. Because of this, Wu Ming specially played a game of rock-paper-scissors with Cuculin. The result was naturally Wu Ming's victory. Later, after Cuculin began to keep watch at night, Wu Ming left the villa. Looking at the time, senior brother should be back soon. Cuculin said to himself, bored. When Wu Ming went out, he said that regardless of whether he achieved his goal or not, Wu Ming would come back in the morning. At this time, a runestone next to Cuculin suddenly burned. This phenomenon was the alarm device set by Cuculin in the distance of the villa was triggered. Wu Ming's return naturally wouldn't trigger the alarm trap, and it was basically impossible for there to be any living people in this city. So the person who triggered the trap could only be one person. A servant. Cuculin frowned. Accompanied by the golden particles, Stheno and Euryale appeared in front of Cuculin. Is it an enemy? Stheno asked. Although Stheno and the other servants were resting in spirit body, they could still detect if something happened. Ah yes, and it's an old acquaintance. Through the runestone set up by Cuculin over there, Cuculin saw the enemy's face. Where's Lancer? Is she still asleep? Cuculin livened up the atmosphere and teased. Sister is accompanying her master. After all, her master is still a cute child. Riley smiled and licked her lips. It felt like she was going to eat Sakura Madu. Let's not talk about that for now. He's heading this way. His target is indeed here. Cuculin looked at the burning marks on the runestone and judged the enemy's movements. So, are you ready? I can't provide combat power. Stheno said. Of course. You just need to be responsible for waking up the masters now. Cuculin said confidently. Stheno and Riley looked at each other, then nodded and disappeared in spirit body again. Then, let me see if you can defend against my attack, Fergus. Chapter 360. Not far from Wu Ming's villa, on the edge of a collapsed house, there was a half-naked man carrying a huge spiral sword. Really, such an intact house. Isn't it obvious that I'm here? Fergus shook his head with some boredom. Basically, in the current Winterwood city, there were no intact houses. If they didn't turn into ruins, they would be burning. The better ones were only able to maintain the basic structure of the house, with only a small part of it collapsing. The small shop that Wu Ming and Algamai found was like that. The small shop was located in a remote corner, and the fire basically didn't reach it. But these houses in Winterwood City had one thing in common, that was they were all dilapidated. And Wu Ming's small villa, because of Gilgamesh's protection, the villa was beautiful and intact. The house looked like a high-rise bungalow, incomparably obvious. Maybe it's the residence of a servant. Let's go and take a look. Fergus said as he walked toward the villa. After taking a few steps, Fergus clearly felt traces of magic around him. Boom! Fergus raised his sword and blasted it toward a house that had been turned into ruins somewhere around him. The ruins were blown away in an instant, and it was completely destroyed. At the same time, the traces of magic also disappeared. Detection? Could it be Cuculin? Fergus thought. Although it was impossible for Cuculin to survive his noble phantasm, there were exceptions to everything. As Cuculin's adoptive father and friend, Fergus naturally wouldn't underestimate Cuculin. Cuculin did have the ability to survive this magic sword. This is my negligence. If it's Cuculin, he can indeed survive. Fergus showed a man's smile. Since that's the case, then let's fight again. Fergus sped up as he spoke. However, Fergus didn't notice that the rune of Rune had already started to burn on the path he had to pass through. Cuculin, who was far away in the villa's courtyard, closed his eyes and felt the arrival of Fergus, then smiled. I'm a caster, Fergus. After that, Cuculin moved his finger. Boom! Around Fergus' position, intense flames erupted and rushed into the sky. The sound of the explosion resounded through the clouds. What? Is the enemy's servant attacking us? Godatsi's bracelet shouted in panic as he rushed over. Calm down, Doctor. The enemy is not coming, Matthew said calmly. Is that so? It's never wrong to be a little more careful. Roman laughed awkwardly as he tried to salvage the situation. However, this only made things even more awkward. Bztb. Then Roman's image appeared beside Godatsi. Is this Cuculin, the son of Light of Ireland? Roman asked as he looked at Cuculin, whose eyes were closed. Regarding the current situation, as well as various information, Mushu had already reported to Chaldea, so Roman also knew about Cuculin. What's with the sound of a soft-footed shrimp? Cuculin opened his eyes and looked at Roman. Soft-footed prawn. Roman turned around in disappointment, looking like he couldn't take it anymore. Pull yourself together, Roman. Romeo. Olga Marie scolded Roman. Aha. Doctor, you have to be strong. Godatsi comforted Roman somewhat weakly. Then Godatsi looked at the explosion in the distance that had almost stopped. Is that your noble phantasm, Cuculin? It's really spectacular. Matthew thought for a moment and denied Godatsi's words. It shouldn't be, senpai. For a noble phantasm, its power is a bit too weak. Although Matthew's noble phantasm was also very weak, in Matthew's opinion, the noble phantasm of the son of Light of Ireland should not be like his own. Matthew is right. This is just a magic explosion caused by me using the magic workshop to connect to the ley lines. It's not a noble phantasm. Cuchulain nodded and confirmed Matthew's conclusion. When Cuchulain came to the villa, Wuming asked Cuchulain to build a magic workshop around the area. Once a magician built a magic workshop, he was no longer a candidate for the weakest servant, but a candidate for the strongest servant. So that means, at this time, Roman had recovered. He turned around and looked at everyone seriously. The enemy hasn't left yet, Olga Marie said calmly, crossing her arms over her chest. That's right, the enemy servant did not leave. With that, Cuchulain closed his eyes again and slammed his staff on the ground. The enemy is the warrior of the Red Branch Knights, Fergus MacRoy. Be prepared for the enemy's attack. Fergus MacRoy, the magic sword user? It's really a headache. Olga Marie frowned. Now that assassin has not come back, and the two goddesses can't fight. At present, we only have caster Cuchulain, lancer Anna, and shielder Matthew. The enemy is Fergus, the magic sword user, which is very unfavorable for us. Listening to Olga Marie's analysis, Matthew, Gudatsi, and Roman on the screen all looked at Olga Marie strangely. It feels like, leader, the enemy is different from before. Gudatsi said slowly. Well, it seems to be more confident and more majestic. Matthew also nodded, indicating that he agreed with Gudatsi's statement. Hey, leader, what happened to you? Roman asked directly. No. You will be the temporary administrator of Chaldea for me. Don't ask so much. Then, Roman was scolded by Olga Marie. Poor doctor. Gudatsi and Matthew looked sympathetically at Roman, who had a "I was wrong, please forgive me" look. Matthew, protect Tachika. Roman, you assist Cuchulain to detect the surrounding magical situation. I'll go find Anna. Olga Marie ordered. Yes, leader. At this time, Anna's voice came. No, I'm already here. A soft and delicate voice came from behind everyone. Anna was wearing a large hooded cloak and holding a scythe. Miss Anna, where is Miss Sakura Madu? Matthew asked with concern. I asked my sisters to take care of her. Anna answered concisely. That's right, they can only take care of the little girl since they can't fight. Olga Marie nodded. After all, the two of them were the enemy's servants. If they were suddenly controlled by the command curse, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the restraint of the heavenly lock was still necessary. Detected a high-density magical reaction in front of us. Speculated to be a noble artifact. Roman's voice suddenly came. What? Everyone didn't expect the opponent to use a noble artifact as soon as he came. And the opponent's movement speed was too fast. Ha ha ha. Take this move of mine. Cuchulain. Caladbolg. Chapter 361. Caladbolg Neon Sword. A rainbow-colored beam of light came from a short distance away. Everything that was shrouded by the rainbow-colored beam of light turned into ashes. Like a surging wave, the rainbow-colored beam of light rushed towards them, and soon arrived in front of Cuchulain and the others. Matthew! Gudatsi shouted quickly. Yes. Clang. Matthew stuck his 2-meter-tall shield into the ground. Lord Chaldea's simulating the beginning of humanity. Hum. The air seemed to vibrate and made a buzzing sound. White lines appeared and formed the shape of a brick. Then the brick appeared and became solid. A holy chalk wall appeared in front of everyone. Boom. The rainbow-colored beam of light hit the chalk wall and made a loud noise. Ugh. Matthew struggled to support his shield, and the tall chalk wall was faintly falling. Fergus's noble phantasm was an A++ grade noble phantasm. Matthew had just been able to release his noble phantasm yesterday, so it was still a little difficult for him to fight against the neon sword. At this moment, Cuchulain waved his staff. At this moment, countless lune runes appeared around the villa, including the ground inside the villa. Countless lune runes turned into pure magic and attached to the chalk wall in front of Matthew. The chalk wall became unusually strong and resisted Fergus's noble phantasm, the neon sword. Soon, the rainbow-colored beam of light disappeared, and Matthew successfully resisted the neon sword. These runes of runes that I set up just in case have come in handy. Cuchulain grinned. Thank you very much, Mr. Cuchulain. Matthew took a short break. Soha held his shield and thanked Cuchulain. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. The enemy is coming. Cuchulain's expression became serious. Oh, this is the warrior who resisted my noble phantasm. I didn't expect it to be a delicate girl. A hearty voice came from where Cuchulain was looking. Matthew and the others began to get ready. A burly man walked over. The 3 deep scratches on his chest were quite conspicuous. Although it was within my expectations that the relic would be blocked, I didn't expect it to be such a beautiful girl. Fergus said heartily as he looked at Matthew with praise. However, Matthew felt that Fergus's eyes were full of aggression. Although I expected you to find this place, your speed is beyond my expectations, Cuchulain said to Fergus. Well, we have a good caster on our side. His brain is more flexible than yours. Fergus laughed. Cuchulain and Olga Marie secretly noted this down. This was another piece of valuable information. Then let's end the feeling. This way, I can rest. This trip to the modern world was really boring. Fergus raised his magic sword once again. Is he going to release his noble phantasm again? Olga Marie was surprised. The magic consumption of the A++ level noble phantasm was quite large, but Fergus was able to release 2 noble phantasms in less than a minute. It was amazing. After all, I have a master who is like a cheat. Fergus's spiral sword began to condense a colorful light. Then I'll do it again. Matthew dragged his tired body and was ready to release his noble phantasm again. However, Cuchulain smiled. Then you have to hurry up, Fergus. That's why he's back. As soon as Cuchulain's voice fell, countless swords, spears, swords, and halberds suddenly bombarded Fergus. These were all noble phantasms. Boom, boom, boom. Countless noble phantasms caused violent explosions. The wind blew so hard that Olga Marie and Gudatsi couldn't open their eyes. Master! Matthew quickly stood in front of Gudatsi, blocking the hurricane for her. Behind Olga Marie, a figure appeared and supported her. So you're back. Olga Marie felt relieved when she felt the broad shoulders behind her. At present, if one were to talk about the backbone of this small team, it would be none other than Wu Ming. And I've brought a surprise, Master, Wu Ming said with a smile. Countless noble phantasms stopped shooting, and the explosions also stopped. Wu Ming waved his hand, and a wind attribute Lune Rune Stone appeared, blowing away all the smoke and dust caused by the explosions, revealing Fergus, who was in the center of the explosion. Even if it was Fergus, under the noble phantasm's attack, his neon sword's noble phantasm would have been interrupted. Fergus was also injured by the noble phantasm and the explosion. Fergus knelt on the ground with one knee, supporting himself with his magic sword. Oh, I see. You guys found her. Fergus seemed to know who made the noble phantasm attack just now, and said with a clear conscience. Humph. Mongrel bastard. Last time you escaped. This time, this king won't be careless. Gilgamesh's figure appeared on the broken street lamp. Gilgamesh, who had left the villa alone, was finally found by Wu Ming. Gilgamesh was wearing a rather revealing golden armor. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and looked at the embarrassed Fergus with anger in his eyes. Yo, did you rope Archer in? Cuchulain came to us, and said with surprise. As the existence who set up the magic workshop, Cuchulain said that when Fergus released the first neon sword, he noticed that Gilgamesh, Wu Ming, was approaching. Thus, Cuchulain didn't rush to deal with Fergus. Instead, he chatted with him to pass the time. However, Wu Ming shook his head. Archer is one of my people. There's no need to talk about roping him in. When he said this, not only Cuchulain, but also Olga Marie were surprised. Listening to Wu Ming's words, it didn't seem like a simple alliance. Olga Marie thought carefully. Well, it's fine as long as he's one of us. Cuchulain waved his hand and didn't ask anything. After all, it was useless to know that Gilgamesh was one of them. Olga Marie looked at Gilgamesh and Wu Ming with a guessing gaze. Let Fergus leave, Gil. Then Wu Ming said to Gilgamesh. Annoying, of course I know. Gilgamesh refuted Wu Ming, and then stretched out his hand. A few golden ripples appeared around Fergus, and a few silver chains instantly tied up Fergus, who was injured and didn't manage to dodge. It seems that I'll have to stop here. Although Gilgamesh's Enkidu only had a special attack on enemies with divinity, for a servant like Fergus with high strength, he could still break free. However, Gilgamesh used Enkidu's Enkidu to deal with Fergus, and only needed a moment to bind him. Poochie. Chapter 362. A few high-level relics appeared from the golden ripples, and pierced through Fergus, who was bound by Enkidu. Fergus's body began to glow. It was a sign that the hero spirit was about to leave the stage. Well, I don't expect to be able to escape a second time after meeting you. Although Fergus was about to leave, he still smiled calmly. This is the price you have to pay for daring to recklessly size up this prince. As he spoke, Gilgamesh moved his arm again. Golden ripples appeared and a high-level relic appeared, cutting Fergus in half. In an instant, Fergus' corpse turned into blue mana particles and disappeared with the wind. At this point, Red Saber Fergus McRoy exited. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Gadazi and the rest who were next to Wuming. Is this your new partner? Hyenryong, you're so useless. Gilgamesh looked at Gadazi and the rest and laughed. Olga Marie looked at Wuming in surprise. It was a different way of addressing him. Although you're weak, your courage to look directly at this king is commendable. Gilgamesh stopped laughing and praised Gadazi and the rest. Alright, get ready. We're going to Winterwood City's Big Hollow, Wuming said. Soon the courtyard of the villa was cleared. As Fergus's neon sword covered a large area, part of the villa was destroyed. The courtyard was filled with broken stones. After all, Matthew had just been able to release his relic not long ago. He could not completely protect the villa. His relic could only protect Gadazi and the rest. Therefore the villa, including the roof, was basically destroyed. In the courtyard, Gilgamesh sat on his exclusive seat. He closed his eyes and crossed his arms as he waited. Gadazi and the rest looked serious. They looked at Wuming and waited for Wuming to speak. Roman turned on the remote screen, which was rare. The screen appeared next to Gadazi. However, when Roman appeared, Gilgamesh looked at Roman differently. Stheno and Urieli brought Sakura Madu out of the room. As soon as Tongying came out, she ran into Anna's arms and hugged him tightly. It seemed like the neon sword had scared the little girl. Now there are only 4 enemies left, Wuming said. Apart from King Arthur, the Black Saber, we've also confirmed the identities of the Red Rider and Red Lancer. The Red Rider is the king of the Kingdom of Macedon. He's known as the Conquering King and Alexander the Great. His name is Iskandar Alexander. That king, huh? Roman pondered. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, snorted in displeasure. This gave Roman a fright. To Gilgamesh, there was only one king in the world, and that was his hero king Gilgamesh. Ignoring Gilgamesh's snort, Wuming continued. The identity of the Red Lancer has also been confirmed. He's the great hero of India, Karna. This statement caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. Although they were prepared for this, they still found it hard to believe. After all, Karna was too powerful. But you can rest assured that with Gil here, you can rest assured. Wuming comforted everyone. As if responding to Wuming's words, Gilgamesh opened his eyes and glanced at everyone with his red pupils. That great hero will be handed over to this king. Just watch. Gilgamesh said domineeringly. He's really reliable, ahahaha. Gadazi laughed. The identity of the Red Caster is still unknown. He was too cautious and did not reveal his real name. Not to mention the noble phantasm, he basically did not reveal anything. He has been following the Red Rider like an ordinary person. Wuming frowned. Well, I'll deal with the caster first. Gil will deal with Karna. Anna and Cuculin will deal with the Conquering King. Wuming began to assign tasks. Understood. Cuculin replied, and Anna just nodded. This king can easily deal with Karna. Gilgamesh said proudly. You have the capital to be proud, but I don't want to clean up the mess for you in the end. Wuming said flatly. This king knows. Although he was still proud, he was frank this time. Then, Wuming looked at Cuculin and Anna. Iskandar is a high-level heroic spirit. You have to be careful. Don't worry, if we can, we will make him leave. If we can't, we will just hold him back. Cuchulain said with a smile. Wuming saw that Anna did not move and Cuchulain smiled and nodded helplessly. I hope it will go well. Wuming always felt that Iskandar was not so easy to deal with. The other party was a king with the title of conquering king. That. Master Assassin, what about us? At this time, Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a good student. Gudatsi also looked at Wuming playfully. Assassin, you didn't forget about us, did you? How could that be? I gave you the most important task. Wuming said with a smile. Could it be? Olga Marie had almost guessed it, the only enemy that no one dealt with. Black Saber, King Arthur, that is your opponent. As if following Olga Marie's words, Wuming directly revealed the mystery. Hey hey hey! Matthew and Gudatsi shouted. They never thought that the one they had to deal with was the ultimate boss, King Arthur. Have confidence in yourself, Matthew Tachika. Wuming advised the two. You have the shield of reason. It's just a holy sword, you can definitely defend against it. But, Matthew was still a little worried. No matter what, sending an immature follower was too rash. When he thought of the power he used was the power of King Arthur's knight, Galahad, Matthew was a little worried. Using the power of a subordinate to fight against a loyal superior, Matthew inevitably felt a little uncomfortable. I remember that there is a story that compares who is stronger between a shield and a spear. Then this time, let's compare who is stronger between a holy sword and a holy shield. Wuming walked to Matthew's side and patted Matthew's little head. This attracted the attention of Olga Marie and Gilgamesh. Li Xiang is here too. Don't be discouraged just because the enemy is King Arthur. You have to protect your master. Matthew looked at Gudatsi, then looked at Wuming and nodded confidently. Yes, I understand, senpai. Then, I will follow Matthew and Tachika. Olga Marie suddenly said. You don't need my help, do you? Olga Marie looked at Wuming. Of course, as your follower, I am very strong. Wuming nodded. It was a wise choice to let Olga Marie follow Matthew and Gudatsi. The reliable Olga Marie could take care of the nervous too. Gilgamesh looked at Olga Marie critically, then shook his head disinterestedly and said nothing. Stheno and Euryale, you two will be responsible for protecting Sakura Madu. Even if most of your power is sealed by Enkidu, you can still protect a little girl. Wuming looked at Stheno and Euryale. Of course. Leave it to me. The two answered affirmatively. Then, Wuming glanced at everyone. In short, the enemy may gather in the big hole in Winterwood City based on our movements. What we need to do is to defeat them, repair the singularity, and save the world. Everyone, do your best. Oh. Chapter 363. Everyone began to move towards the Yuanzhong mountain. However, civilians should just walk on the ground. Gilgamesh said proudly and took out Vamona from his gate of Babylon. Accompanied by a loud roar, Gilgamesh left angrily. Why would he be angry? So Gilgamesh invited Wuming to go to Vamona together, but Wuming refused. So Gilgamesh left angrily. You really dare? Hero King's eyes are burning with fire. Cuchulain said beside Wuming. Gudatsi and the others all nodded frantically. Just now, everyone could see Gilgamesh's anger. After all, I'm going with Gilgamesh, what if you get into trouble? Wuming was right. Although Wuming seemed to have 7 servants, they didn't have much combat power. Stheno and Euryale, because they were bound by Wuming's fake Enkidu, they couldn't fight. Matthew and Anna, both of them were immature servants. One was a sub-servant that had just been given power, and the other was a young servant that was summoned in an immature state. Their attribute values were not strong. They could be regarded as average. Although the two of them had great potential, it was just potential. It was the same as having an attribute value of D++. Although they were only D class, they could burst out 3 times the power at a critical moment, and they could instantly surpass a class. But that was only for a moment, and they were only D class under normal circumstances, so it couldn't be counted as strength. As for Cuchulain, Cuchulain was summoned as a caster. He wasn't weak, but the general ability value of a caster servant was very low. Once they encountered a surprise attack, the chances of them surviving were not high. Now, only Gilgamesh and Wu Ming could serve as trump cards. Gilgamesh had the Gate of Babylon, which contained countless treasures. Moreover, he had the guile-parting sword Ea, which gave him an invincible battle strength. However, your frontal combat ability is not strong. You can ambush the enemy, but you are not suitable to deal with the enemy's surprise attack. Olga Marie naturally understood this principle and analyzed it. She believed that Wu Ming also understood this principle. Although Wu Ming was strong, it was summoned as an assassin. Its attributes were more inclined towards assassination and detection, and its relic was targeted at females. Its skills were only for an assassin, so it could not be called a trump card. Therefore, Wu Ming could follow Gilgamesh and leave first. However, Wu Ming rejected Gilgamesh's proposal. I naturally have a way. Wu Ming smiled and remained mysterious. Let's not talk about this first. In the current situation, I think it is wiser for us to go together. Cuchulain also expressed his own opinion. Well, that's it. Wu Ming smiled and said nothing. He continued to move forward. Gudatzi and others followed. Olga Marie was helpless for a while, and then followed the large group. By the way, why do you know so much? Olga Marie asked. Everyone could understand that Olga Marie was asking about the enemy servant's intelligence. When he heard Olga Marie's question, Wu Ming thought of what happened last night. Wu Ming went out to look for Gilgamesh and accidentally met a few servants. They were the red-haired Red Rider and the unusually cautious Red Caster, who dressed like an ordinary person. When he was exchanging information with everyone, there was one thing that Wu Ming didn't mention. Even if Wu Ming had seen Caster's appearance before, Wu Ming once looked for Gem Man Zelik and saw a young man beside him. It was said that he was Emilo II, the current monarch of modern magic. However, Wu Ming was sure that the person was not Emilo II. According to Wu Ming's speculation, it was likely that he was relying on something else. After that, it seemed that Caster's noble phantasm exposed Wu Ming's whereabouts. In order to avoid trouble, Wu Ming quickly left. After all, the main task was to find Gilgamesh, not to fight with the enemy. Rider and Caster didn't chase after him, so Wu Ming left safely. Later, it seemed that Gilgamesh also sensed Wu Ming's aura, so he drove Wu Ming to Wu Ming's side. After all, Wu Ming was now Gilgamesh's master, so they could naturally sense each other when they were not far away. After finding Gilgamesh, Wu Ming didn't rush to take Gilgamesh back to the villa. Instead, he found a roof and asked Gilgamesh if he knew any information about the enemy. So Wu Ming knew the identity of Iskandar and Karna, but he didn't know the true identity of Caster. The real names of Iskandar, Karna, and Darius III were told to Wu Ming by Gilgamesh. According to Gilgamesh, Iskandar reported his name at the beginning, and he also reported the real name of Darius III. It had to be said that Iskandar's king's demeanor was quite heroic. Since Winterwood City was suddenly burned by a fire, Gilgamesh left the villa. On the surface, he said that he came out to have fun, but in fact, Gilgamesh was worried about Wu Ming's situation, so he went out to find Wu Ming. After sensing that the contract between Wu Ming and himself was still there, plus Gilgamesh was instigated by some people, as a result, Gilgamesh kept fighting with several servants. Wu Ming observed several small explosions on the tall building, many of which were caused by Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh treated Fergus cruelly because Fergus flirted with Gilgamesh, and as a result, he was chased by Gilgamesh. Because this is the information that Gil collected during this time, plus the information that I collected. She caused a lot of trouble outside. Wu Ming smiled. Then what do you have to deal with the incoming enemies? Olga Marie continued to ask. Wu Ming stopped, turned his head, and looked at everyone. Gudatzi and the others looked at Wu Ming attentively. It's a secret. Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Gudatzi and the others almost fell to the ground. You bastard. Olga Marie angrily clenched her fists and looked at Wu Ming. Ha ha ha. As expected of senior brother. Cuchulain also laughed. On the contrary, the three Gorgon sisters didn't care about this from the beginning, and they didn't feel disappointed or tricked. Just in time, the enemy is coming, senior brother, show us. Although Cuchulain said jokingly, his expression became serious. Boom. Moo. Accompanied by the roar of thunder and the roar of the sacred bull, a chariot pulled by 2 bulls flew from the sky. Chapter 364. Alalalalath Conqueror King Iskandar is here. The driver of the war chariot was a muscular man with short red hair and red pupils. He was dressed in an ancient armor and a red cloak, and he shouted loudly, "Oh, Gorgon's goddess is here? Well, it looks like you have been captured, ahahahaha." Sure enough, the conqueror King Alexander the Great. Iskandar's king's temperament was really heroic. Everyone couldn't help but think of the word heroic in their hearts. Forget it, do as you wish. On the chariot, the man with long hair and modern clothes next to Iskandar said indifferently, "Oh, Kongming, I still think that telling us our names is what heroes should do, ha. Iskandar's bearded face that was connected to his hair laughed, and patted the shoulder of the young man called Kongming. Well, that guy exposed Castor's real name again. Wuming's guess was right. This was not Ermero II, but a servant who came through Ermero II's body. So this cautious servant is the resourceful military counselor, Zhuge Kongming. Kukulin nodded. No wonder he is so cautious. Even Assassin didn't find out his real name. Matthew praised. Ah yes, after all, he is known for his caution. Zhuge Ming is cautious all his life. This sentence was not said for nothing. Well, Zhuge Kongming rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. Didn't we agree not to reveal my real name, Conqueror King? Zhuge Kongming said with some distress. Ha, what does it matter? Everyone here is a hero who is about to face King Arthur. It is the final moment, there is no need to hide your real name. Iskandar laughed unconsciously and patted Zhuge Kongming's body again. Forget it. Zhuge Kongming dodged Iskandar's arm and looked at the others. That's right. My real name is Zhuge Kongming. I'm a sinner who failed to restore the Han dynasty. There's no point in remembering it. Zhuge Kongming said indifferently. Then Zhuge Kongming looked at Wuming. Do you recognize this body of mine? I'll say this in advance. I didn't erase his consciousness. Instead, I let his consciousness sleep within my body. After all, there's a huge problem with this Holy Grail war, Zhuge Kongming explained. Generally speaking, the servant who descended through dependence had the ability to erase the consciousness of the body. However, Zhuge Kongming didn't do that. Instead, he chose to put his body's consciousness to sleep and act on his behalf. This was similar to Matthew. Matthew's power was Galahad's departure, leaving the power for Matthew to use. On the other hand, Zhuge Kongming put the consciousness of the human body to sleep and let him, an outsider, take over. In addition, the servant who descended through dependence could also choose to integrate with the consciousness of the body. There were very few servants who would choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. Basically, if they weren't evil people, they wouldn't choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. I understand the general situation. Are you going to hinder us? Wuming asked. Ha, how is that possible? I'm here to ask for your help. Iskandar laughed and said something that surprised everyone. After all, we belong to the human side. The guy who summoned us is obviously standing on the opposite side of the human. Zhuge Kongming explained. Zhuge Kongming said, and Iskandar stopped his chariot on the ground. Let's not talk about helping us first. Isn't your master that man? Wuming asked as he looked at the 2 chariots that landed on the ground. Yes, you're right. We are indeed that man's servants. Iskandar admitted generously. I know what you're worried about. If we work together with you, it's hard to guarantee that our master won't attack you at a critical moment. That was why Wuming put the heavenly lock on Stheno and Euryale. But don't worry. My noble phantasm can suppress such a situation. Iskandar laughed. My noble phantasm is an area of effect formation. Not only can it weaken the enemy, but it can also resist the master's command. Unless more than 3 command curses are activated at the same time, it won't work, Zhuge Kongming explained. Wuming looked at Stheno and Euryale. That way, the 2 of them would be able to fight as well. The man in the green hat placed a command curse on each of our 7 servants from the beginning. So as long as we're within the range of Kongming's noble phantasm, his command curse will lose its effect. Ahahaha, you're indeed a wise strategist. You're extraordinary. Iskandar laughed again and patted Zhuge Kongming's shoulder. However, Iskandar did not notice that Zhuge Kongming was about to lose it. The man in the green hat has been with Saber all this time, and he doesn't show any signs of leaving. So I've hidden my noble phantasm in the big hole in Winterwood City. You just have to activate it when the time comes, Zhuge Kongming explained. I see. Wu Ming looked at his companions and nodded. Well then, I wish us a pleasant cooperation. Wu Ming said with a smile and extended his hand. Pleasant cooperation. Zhuge Kongming also extended his hand and shook hands with Iskandar. By the way, do you guys want to be my subordinates? Iskandar looked at Wu Ming and the others with joy. Sigh. Matthew and Gudatsi were stunned. Olga Marie shook her head disinterestedly. Stheno, Riley, and Medusa shook their heads without even thinking about it. Sorry, I don't want to be someone's subordinate. I want to be free. Besides, I already have a master. Cuculin grinned and pointed at Gudatsi behind him. How about you, assassin? Your assassination skills are superb. I didn't even notice you. However, you don't look like a villain, so I welcome you to join my army. Iskandar saw that everyone rejected him and looked at Wu Ming, who had yet to speak. Wu Ming smiled at Iskandar's words. I've taught many kings. You don't need me to teach you. The one beside you is enough. Wu Ming's meaning was obvious. He chose to reject as well. I've said it before. With their personalities, they won't be your subordinates, Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Ha ha ha, you won't know if you don't try. What a pity. Iskandar saw that no one wanted to join his army. He was not embarrassed. Instead, he laughed happily. At this time, Wu Ming's words attracted Olga Marie's attention again. Even Matthew, Gudatsi, Anna, and even Cuculin looked at Wu Ming in surprise. Stheno and Riley, who had already seen Wu Ming's identity through the goddess god core, were not surprised. Senior brother, you've been through a lot. But it seems like you're doing well, Cuculin praised. Well, I've been through a lot. However, I'll tell you about it when I have the chance. Wu Ming smiled at Gudatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's curious faces. Then Wu Ming walked forward. Now the most important thing is to end this. Chapter 365. With the addition of Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming, the pressure on Wu Ming and the rest was significantly reduced. Now the only enemies left were Artoria, Karna, and Leviticus. It was undoubtedly much easier. Then the two groups separated. Wu Ming and the rest were working together with Iskandar, but there was no need for the two groups to work together. In order to prevent us from being discovered, let's split up temporarily. When you reach the big hole, we'll come to support you. After that, Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming continued to carry out the mission of the command incantation, which was to kill all living creatures. However, in Winterwood City, the only living creatures were Wu Ming and the rest, as well as their servants. Therefore, the command incantation was not convincing at all. In addition, a long time had passed, so they knew that the command incantation's coercive power had basically disappeared. Naturally, Stheno and Riley felt the same way. However, to be safe, Wu Ming did not let them come into contact with Enkidu. After all, there was nothing wrong with being cautious. While Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming were constantly destroying the destroyed houses, Wu Ming and the rest were heading toward Winterwood City in Yuanzhong Mountain. When they were almost at the foot of Yuanzhong Mountain, Wu Ming realized that something was wrong. The concentration of magic on Yuanzhong Mountain was a little high. Boom. At that moment, the sound of an explosion came from the mountain. Gilgamesh has encountered an enemy. Wu Ming took a step forward and headed toward the direction of the explosion. Pay attention to the surroundings. After that, Wu Ming disappeared. Near the top of Yuanzhong Mountain, two figures were moving rapidly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Golden ripples constantly emerged from the back of the golden figure. Countless relics were shot out, and the target was the other golden figure. Bang bang bang. However, the golden red figure's martial arts skills were extraordinary. The strange long spear in his hand was constantly waving, knocking away the treasures one after another. Damn it! You bastard! How dare you shoot down this king's mount? As he spoke, Gilgamesh kept activating the gate of Babylon, and countless relics were shot at the spearmen again. The order I received is to kill anyone who dares to go up the mountain. Your Vimana is also a forbidden item, Gilgamesh. The spearman said Gilgamesh's real name. Then you shall receive the king's wrath. Karna. That was right. The one who was fighting with Gilgamesh was Karna, the hero of India. Karna was originally ordered to go to Winterwood City to kill all living creatures, but there were basically no living creatures others as followers. It was at that time that Karna discovered Gilgamesh, who was hanging out outside. He's is not a servant. Karna had Karna sneak attack Karna to S2s. Although Gilgamesh was quite arrogant, he did have the right to be arrogant. Under the attack of Karna's Brahma, curse me, Brahma, Kundala, Gilgamesh successfully released a shield from his treasury before the attack arrived, and blocked Karna's throwing relics. Then the two of them began to fight. However, Karna seemed to have received some kind of message, and he abandoned the battle and fled. Gilgamesh did not chase after Karna, saying that he was a bastard who ran away. Just now, when Gilgamesh drove the Vimana to the top of the Uzong mountain, suddenly another Brahma, curse me Brahma, curse me, spear pierced through the Vimana, and the Vimana disappeared in the starlight. On the other hand, Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the Vimana, was incomparably furious. How dare a bastard shoot down this king's ride? This king will make you regret your blindness. Therefore, the two of them began to fight. The two of them were able to recognize each other because their respective characteristics were somewhat similar. And Wuming and Lev had also told Gilgamesh and Karna about the enemy's characteristics. In addition, the two of them were not very far from each other, so naturally, they knew each other's identities. Come on, Hero King Gilgamesh. Although he was surprised that the Hero King, Gilgamesh, was a woman at first, Karna did not underestimate Gilgamesh. After a series of actions, Karna could see that Gilgamesh was a powerful king. Then hundreds and even thousands of golden ripples appeared, surrounding Karna and Gilgamesh. Then hundreds and thousands of relics slowly emerged from the golden ripples. You should be satisfied to be bombarded by so many relics, Karna. Gilgamesh mocked Karna. Karna did not speak. Instead, he carefully looked at the weapons and relics. According to Karna's analysis, the only weapons that could pose a threat to him were divine weapons and weapons with the special ability to ignore defense. After all, Karna's golden armor could weaken all damage, and he knew 1/10 of it was a divine artifact armor. It was said that the armor given by the sun god, Surya, condensed light itself. It was said that even people could not hurt Karna at all. If Karna had enough mana, he could even keep his body unharmed. Lev, who had established a contract with the 7 servants, naturally had enough mana. So Karna was now very strong. To be able to die under these hundreds and thousands of treasures, you should be satisfied. At this time, Gilgamesh was in a good mood. He smiled at Karna, who was trapped in the middle of countless golden ripples. Die. After that, the hundreds and thousands of relics all shot toward Karna from the golden ripples. At this time, Karna also moved. Boom, boom, boom. That was the sound of countless relics exploding when they hit Karna. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of hard objects colliding was constantly heard. That was the sound of Karna knocking away the relics. As for the treasures that were shot at Karna and touched him, they all exploded. The wind and flames from the explosion shone brightly on Karna, but Karna continued to selectively deflect some of the treasures away. Without exception, all the treasures that were sent flying by Karna were treasures that could restrain Karna's divinity armor. As for the treasures that attacked Karna's body, they couldn't even break through Karna's defense. It must be noted that Wuming defeated Karna last time, because Karna's golden armor had disintegrated. Taking advantage of that opportunity, Wuming injured Karna with his light cannon. Do you think it's that easy? Gilgamesh sneered. Pfft. Chapter 366. Pact. Several noble artifacts pierced through Karna's body, and blood splattered everywhere. The noble artifacts that were inserted into Karna's body turned into spots of golden light, and were retrieved by Gilgamesh into the gate of Babylon. Cough. I see. You hid these noble artifacts in the shadows of other noble artifacts. As expected of the hero king. Karna coughed up blood and said with some shame. Gilgamesh was an archer after all. If he just threw noble artifacts around, it would be too degrading. Humph. Bastard. This is the price you pay for attacking this king. Gilgamesh said disdainfully. At this moment, a huge dark purple tentacle that looked like an octopus suddenly broke out of the ground. In an instant, Karna was tied up by this huge dark purple tentacle without any resistance and was dragged into the hole in the ground created by the tentacle. Humph. At best, you're just a bastard. Gilgamesh said disdainfully and did not pursue. At this time, Wuming also arrived. Yenryong, you're late. You didn't see this king's moment of bravery, but seeing that you rushed over to support this king will not argue with you. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming and said arrogantly with squinted eyes. In the eyes of others, Gilgamesh was like a breeze, but at this time, Gilgamesh gave Wuming the feeling of a dog asking for praise from its owner. Yes, so your majesty has the enemy left? Wuming said as he looked at the hole in the ground. Here, this is the hole. A rat-like tentacle took Karna away. Gilgamesh pointed at the hole in the ground and said disdainfully again. Tentacle? Wuming frowned. He had never heard of an enemy servant that could use tentacles. Thinking of this, Wuming squatted down and looked at the hole in the ground. There was a trace of mucus on the edge of the hole. At this time, Gudatsi and the others hurriedly ran up the mountain. Gudatsi and Sakura Madu were both held by their respective servants. Olga Marie's servant Wuming had already run up, so Cuculin was the one holding her. But let go of me. Olga Marie said to Cuculin behind her with a red face. The reason Olga Marie became like this was because Cuculin lifted Olga Marie by her collar. It's really troublesome. Anna and Mashu have their own masters, and the two goddesses over there won't do such a rough job. I'm the only one left, and they won't let me hug them, so I can only do this. With that, Cuculin loosened his grip and Olga Marie fell to the ground. Of course she landed on her but first. Damn it! I'll remember you, Cuculin. Olgamai stood up and rubbed her buttocks, looking at Cuculin with shame and indignation. On the other hand, Cuculin looked indifferent. After all, he would return to the Martyr's Palace once the Holy Grail War was over. There was no point in looking for trouble. Something unexpected has happened, Wuming said when he saw that the commotion was almost over. Then everyone looked at Wuming. Wuming then told them what had happened. Gilgamesh and Karna fought. Then, a tentacle took away Karna, who didn't resist, leaving a hole covered in mucus. According to the information we have, the enemy doesn't have any servants with the ability to control tentacles. Olga Marie touched her chin and said, no matter if it's Karna or King Arthur, neither of them has such an ability, and the other servants have either left or are on our side. Wuming analyzed. In other words, Cuculin frowned. Is there a new servant? Gudatsi was surprised. Tachika is right. Judging from Karna's appearance, the man in the green hat must have summoned another servant. Wuming said solemnly, who the hell is that guy? He can summon an unlimited number of servants. What a troublesome enemy. Olga Marie said with a headache. That. Could it be the ability of the guy who pretended to be Professor Reef? Matthew raised his small hand and asked. That's right. The other party can provide 7 servants at once, and he has the purpose of destroying the world. It's very likely that he's not human. Gudatsi said excitedly as if she had discovered a new continent. It's not impossible, but I think it's more likely that the other party summoned another servant. Wuming didn't deny Gudatsi's theory, but proposed another possibility. Since the other party can provide 7 servants at once, then it's not impossible to summon another 7 or even more. Assassin is right. We have to prepare for the worst. Olga Marie also nodded. By the way, why did you believe the Red Rider and Red Caster so easily? Aren't you afraid that they lied to you? At this time Olga Marie asked Wuming. It's not that I don't believe you. I just want to know what you were thinking at that time. Aren't you afraid that they lied to you? Olga Marie asked carefully. After all, they were in a situation where they would die if they made a wrong move. If the other party lied to them, they would be finished. At that time, Olga Marie wanted to ask, but because the other party was there, she didn't have the nerve to ask. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, and it was impossible for her not to be suspicious. I don't think Iskandar will lie. Wu Ming smiled, and then continued to move toward the entrance of the Yuanzhong mountain. Huh? It's that simple? Olga Marie found it hard to believe. Just because they believed that the other party wouldn't lie, they cooperated so easily? I also feel that the king's temperament. I don't think he will lie to us. Matthew thought for a moment and said, Really, do you have a sixth sense? Olga Marie said helplessly, Okay, don't talk nonsense, let's go. Cuculin said, pushing Olga Marie. I know, let go of me. So, everyone came to the Yuanzhong Mountains Ludong Temple. There was a large passage behind it that led directly to the inside of the big hollow. With the number of Wu Ming and the others, it was a bit inappropriate to take the previous small path. The whole Winterwood city turned into a field of fire, but the strange thing was that the temple was intact, and only some of the surrounding edges were broken. Let's go. Wu Ming said concisely. Just as everyone was about to enter the Ludong temple, Wu Ming immediately held out his hand and stopped everyone. Both Cuculin and Wu Ming looked cautious. What's wrong? What happened? Gudatzi asked. Get ready, there's an enemy. Olga Marie gestured and prepared the magic bullets. Bang! Suddenly, the door of the Ludong temple was violently opened. Chapter 367. Bang! The door of Ludong temple was violently opened, but it wasn't an enemy that came out. Instead, it was an octopus-like monster that was as tall as a person with tentacles. In just a few seconds, countless sea monsters filled the Willow Cave Temple. They kept pouring out of the Willow Cave Temple's entrance and rushed towards Wu Ming and the others. Wah! What? What is this? It's disgusting. Gudatzi was shocked. There was no need to look closely. These monsters were covered in mucus, and the ground they passed through was wet. Olga Marie didn't say anything, but her legs were trembling. Sakura Madu shrank into Anna's arms in fear. Matthew was also afraid, but he still held on. He immediately raised his shield and stood in front of Gudatzi and Olga Marie. Only Gorgon's sister, Stheno, and the others weren't afraid of these things. These things look like sea monsters. Stheno looked at the tentacle monsters that were advancing and frowned in disgust. Although she wasn't afraid, she still felt disgust. Even the goddess hated these things. These things aren't worth this king's time. I'll leave them to you. With that, Gilgamesh's spiritual form disappeared. It seemed that she also hated these tentacles. Sure enough, these tentacles have a special attack on women. Wu Ming thought. Leave it to me. Anna said and handed Sakura Madu to her sister. Then, she rushed into the sea monsters with her scythe. No one objected. After all, Anna's scythe was more effective against these things that could infinitely regenerate as long as they had magic. The immortal slaughtering blade harp. This was the divine sword that had killed the demon Medusa. It could restrain some undying creatures and cause irrecoverable wounds to the opponent. For some inexplicable reason, this sword turned into a scythe and became Anna's weapon when she descended as a lancer. Swish, swish, swish. Just a casual slash was enough to kill a large number of sea monsters in front of him. The power of the undying slaughter blade harp completely killed these sea monsters that should have been able to regenerate. However, it was a little difficult for Anna to deal with the sea monsters that were still pouring out continuously by herself. Boom! A violent explosion came from beside Anna. The sea monster in front of Anna was blown to pieces. Anna turned around and looked behind her. Cuculin raised his staff, which was smoking like a gun shaft that had just been fired. Blow them to smithereens. I don't believe they can recover. Cuculin grinned. However, Anna was a little dissatisfied. Cleaning up these sea monsters was her mission. The enemy should have discovered us. Let's finish them off and leave as soon as possible. Wu Ming tried to persuade Anna. Then, Anna nodded with a frown on her face, but she still looked unhappy. Then I won't hold back. Cuculin said, laughing wantonly. The Loon rune in his hand kept drawing. Countless flames shot at the sea monsters, setting off a series of explosions. Boom, boom, boom. This series of explosions had killed almost 1/3 of the sea monsters. At this time, a few rune stones fell into the center of the remaining sea monsters, producing golden flames. Boom, boom. Then Cuculin looked at Wu Ming. The two of you should hurry up. Wu Ming smiled, then threw the Loon rune stone in his hand at the sea monsters again. Are we going to compete? I won't lose. Cuculin said excitedly, attacking the sea monsters frantically. In less than 5 minutes, the sea monsters that covered the sky disappeared, leaving behind a faint layer of black dust and traces of various elements. Ice, water, fire, wind, thunder, electricity, earth. Traces of almost all elements could be seen. This made Gadazi and the others dumbfounded. Especially Olga Marie. That's a rune stone. How could an assassin have so many rune stones? Olga Marie complained crazily. Secrets that could not be known were fatal to Olga Marie. And assassin, where the hell did you get those rune stones from? Why do you have so many types of rune stones? Roman also complained. It's just my ability. Those rune stones were just made when I was bored. Wu Ming shrugged. However, assassin's damage output is really amazing. Matthew wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. After all, Matthew and the others had been watching from the side. Wu Ming's damage output was almost higher than Cuculin's. Cuculin's attack was just a simple red burst of flames, while their Loon rune stones were all kinds of elements, so it was easy to distinguish. The reason why Matthew said this was because of the difference in their ranks. Cuculin was a caster, so it was normal for him to have AoE damage. After all, he was a mage cannon. However, Wu Ming was not a caster, but an assassin. As an assassin, he was even more AoE than a caster. It was simply outrageous. I've handed over almost all the offensive runestones I've made in the past. It's normal for them to have such an effect, Wu Ming said with a smile. He opened a part of the Dragoness space in the center of his palm, and threw out a large number of Loon rune stones from his noble phantasm. Because they were in a hurry, Wu Ming bombarded the sea monsters indiscriminately at a speed that even Mashu couldn't see clearly. Together with Cuculin, the two of them were able to destroy all the sea monsters that could affect the entire Fuyuki city in 5 minutes. There was another reason why Wu Ming used up all the Loon rune stones. After all, they can be made in the future, can't they? These rune stones were made to deal with situations similar to this. Wu Ming smiled. At this time, Gilgamesh lifted his spirit form. As far as actors are concerned, these pieces of trash are not qualified at all, but they let me see a good show. Gilgamesh looked at the debris on the ground and said sarcastically, "If you could help me, it would be much easier." Wu Ming shrugged his shoulders. Humph. This king said that these things are not worthy of this king's help. Gilgamesh glared at Wu Ming fiercely. Yes, then let's go. The enemy is waiting for us. We can't lose the limelight. After dealing with Gilgamesh, Wu Ming said to everyone, "It seems that you are getting bolder and bolder, Hienryong." Looking at Wu Ming and others who had walked away, Gilgamesh, who fell behind the crowd, said angrily. But then Gilgamesh's anger turned into joy, and he followed the crowd in his spirit form. Seeing your relationship with this king forgives your willfulness, Hienryong. Thank you very much, King. Wu Ming smiled without turning his head. Soon Wu Ming and others left the Yuzong Mountain Ludong Temple, and came to the Yuzong Mountain Big Cave. Wu Ming, Gilgamesh, Cuculin, Matthew, Anna, Stheno, Uriali, Gadazi, Olga Marie, Sakura Madu. 7 servants and 3 masters, the troops that caused the chaos of this era, arrived at the Demon King's castle. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.